All right, everybody. We are going to, or I'm going to talk about prenatal yoga today. I'm going to say, first of all, that I am not prenatal yoga certified. Um, it's just not one of the certifications I have yet. It's one I want to pursue. But these are just some basic things to watch out for when you have someone that's pregnant come into class. Never assume that someone is pregnant. I usually just give like a general, like, if there's anyone that's pregnant, especially if I have new people in class. If you have your regulars, you're going to know, they're going to tell you. And a lot of the times people will come in and tell you right away that they're pregnant. Just don't ever ask someone, don't ever assume that someone is pregnant unless there is a baby dangling from between their legs. It's just, you just want to be very careful with assuming. And I never say women anymore. I just individuals, because we have a lot of people who are non-binary, or they they are not male or female, or they don't consider to be male or female. They're non-gender neutral or gender neutral. So I always just say individuals or people. So just be very careful with that. If I'm meeting anyone for the very first time, I just make the general statement of, if anyone in class is pregnant, then we'll do this, or do this instead. And I welcome this as a topic that we discuss when we meet in person, because it's some of the verbiage. You just want to be careful so you don't offend anybody. I worry about offending people all the time. It's tough. It's tough. So these are basic highlights, and I have pregnant individuals in class all the time. One of the very first things, if someone tells me they're pregnant, the very first thing I'll ask is, has the doctor cleared you to practice? Most of the time they'll say yes. The worst thing is when someone comes to your yoga class and they're coming to like a fast flow class and it's hot and they've never practiced yoga before. I very gently and kindly tell them that this is not the class for them. You should not be starting any sort of vigorous exercise when you're pregnant. If you've never exercised before. Now, there are always going to be exceptions to the rule, because there are people who are pregnant who have exercised their entire life, and they could be 9 months pregnant and still be standing on their hands with their legs in the air. You can only guide people and give them some suggestions, but they don't have to listen to what you're going to say. And unfortunately, a lot of people just don't. So let's revisit this when I meet with you in person, because it's something that we just need to talk about some more when we talk about special populations. So, some highlights of prenatal yoga. The vena cava is the major blood source that runs up and down your body, and that is on the right hand side. So the inferior vena cava is going to take the blood flow from the bottom, from your heart down to the bottom of your body, and bring it back up. The superior vena cava goes up, to the upper extremities and comes back down towards the heart. This vein returns all the blood back to the heart, but it goes everywhere, down to the body, down to the ground, and then up to, we're coming up to the crown of the head, and that's on the right hand side. So whenever we are coming down to the floor, if they're going to lie on their side, you want them to lay on their left hand side, so they're not pinching off that blood flow in any way. So just stay on the left hand side. For Savasana, lie on the left side with knees bent and something between the knees. That's their choice. So once you get to a certain part, a certain progression in your pregnancy, lying down on your side is not even that comfortable. So for Savasana, they can be on their left-hand side. I always suggest they curl up with their arm on their head, and then maybe a blanket under their belly, and maybe a bolster in between their knees. They'll figure out what's most comfortable, because if you've been pregnant, I know everyone here has been pregnant. You're not very comfortable. So you never want to be lying flat on your back when you're pregnant, especially on a hard surface. You don't want to constrict any blood flow to the baby. It's not going to be a comfortable position anyway. So they can lie propped up on a bolster. So if this is my bolster, I've got a couple of blocks stacked underneath here, and then they can just recline at an angle. Keep the head above the heart. They're going to be more comfortable that way anyway. So always at an angle or on their left hand side in Savasana. If you're starting a position on your back, have them propped up. Offer them all sorts of props, bolsters, blankets. Make sure they are comfortable. They are going to be very uncomfortable. No asanas or no postures on the back after the first trimester. Like I said, coming at an angle, it reduces blood flow to the uterus. Most people really don't know they're pregnant until we're getting closer to, I wouldn't say most people. Some people do know early on in their first trimester, but some may not even know until they're closer to their second trimester. So if they don't know they're pregnant and they're lying on their back, it's going to hurt them. No, not really, but just for precautionary sake, have them lying at an angle. I can't even read my own handwriting. I wrote them all down so I don't forget to highlight anything. But Julie will also email you all these notes because this is just so important to remember. I keep these in a binder somewhere I have them all memorized now, but print them out, keep them close at hand so you have them. Propping the knees up can elevate pressure in the lower back. So if you're again in that reclined position, being able to keep the knees up over a bolster is a nice sensation sometimes. It can help alleviate the tension in the lower back. Of course, no lying on the belly. That won't even be an option, once the baby starts to grow, because you're going to actually feel that. You're going to be lying on your child. It's not comfortable. Now, when we have restorative yoga, there are ways you can build an entire little structure for the body to lie on so that the belly can come down into that hole. But I just, for the sake of this prenatal, don't encourage them to come down to their belly. When you are coming down from that tricep push-up into that tricep push-up or chaturanga down to the floor, they just have them stay on their knees, come down at an angle, and then come back up. So I'll demonstrate that when I show you some postures here in a little bit for postures or modifications of postures. Don't come down all the way to the belly. Offer spine extensions instead of forward bends, like staff pose. When you're doing these forward folds, when you're doing the spinal extensions, they can keep their legs apart and then let the belly come down a little bit, and then they can, even when you're in a forward fold, just separating the legs so they have room for the belly. Hamstrings get really tight, the hips get really tight, the lower back gets really tight. So those, forward folds and being able to, you don't want to come down too far. You don't want to get dizzy. So even seated forward folds are going to be better than, standing forward folds, so they don't get dizzy with the head being below the heart. But stretching out the hamstrings and the lower back is going to be very delightful. It's going to feel really good. So you can always offer them to have a seat. Now, of course, when they're standing up, you're not in forward fold for a very long time. So they can just do a little bit of a forward fold and then come up. You make sure they're always going slow so they don't get that orthostatic blood pressure where they get dizzy, and you don't want anyone to fall over. Just keeping your legs open wide. Using in child's pose, so once they get to a certain size, once the baby gets to a certain size and the belly is really large, you can use blocks under the elbows and under the hands, so it can help prop them up a little bit so they're not so close to the floor, which is just a great modification anyway for anyone, because you can stretch your shoulders a little bit deeper. Like I said, offer blankets, bolsters, blocks to sit upon. No compression twists, only open twists. So in a compression twist, as an example, like where you bring your knee up and your elbow comes to the outside of the knee and you pulling and you're kind of contorting the torso so it's twisting in opposite directions, none of that. None of that. It would be really difficult anyway to even just contort your body into that position just because of because the baby's in the way. So it's not. At some point, you don't even have to tell them because it's not even going to be a possibility. There's just the baby's in the way. Open twists are fine. So if you're sitting on the floor and you just want to use your legs your hands against your legs to turn gently from side to side, perfect. Great lower back stretches. Twists are always great. If you've been pregnant, your lower back starts to really hurt. So twists are a really good thing, but no compression twists. None, please. Let's see. No inversions at the end of the first trimester and the beginning of the second trimester, because the placenta is starting to attach to the wall of the uterus. So, and honestly, there's really, the way I look at it, there's no good reason to do headstands, handstands, and all of those things, because if you fall and you can't catch yourself, there's a possibility that they're going to fall on their belly, and that would be terrible. Falling on your back would be terrible. Hurting yourself while you're pregnant is just not something that you want to do. So I always encourage no inversions except legs up a wall. Legs up a wall. At first, when I first started teaching yoga, it was contraindicated to do legs up a wall because it is an inversion. But then there was this thing, an article I read, and then I started doing more and more research, and I found that doctors are now saying that legs up a wall is actually wonderful for pregnant women because of the pitting edema, because of the swelling, because of all of that water retention in the legs. If they can lay down on their back and get their legs up the wall, then hopefully some of that fluid will drain back into the body. That lymphatic system will become a little bit more I don't even know what you want to call it, works a little more efficiently. And not only that, but just getting that water retention to come back down into the body, which is a good thing. It helps aching legs. It's a nice way to stretch out the hamstrings. And when I teach you modifications, I can show you how to bolster up a pregnant woman or a pregnant individual while they're in legs up a wall, because that is actually the only inversion that the doctors say is perfectly safe for most pregnant individuals, because there's always the exceptions. Try, if you are going to do an inversion, if the pregnant person is going to do an inversion, you want it to be for less than 30 seconds. So, like I said, forward folds, less than 30 seconds. And just remind them, you can come up sooner than everyone else. Plank or your chaturanga is going to be on the knees, like I mentioned earlier. And when I talk about modifications in my videos coming up very soon, I will show you what I mean when I say on your knees. You've probably seen it as just a very modified, when we were kids, it was a girl push-up when you had to do that in PE class for that president's fitness test or whatever. You could do the girl push-ups. It was always frustrating to me. A push-up is a push-up. Let's see. No breath retention. No powerful breath practices. Smooth, even, and continuous breathing. So when we talk about that 3-part breath, the diaphragmatic breath, the one that most of the time is cued in yoga, perfectly fine. Alternate nostril breathing is great. So if you're holding one side, plug, that is fine. No breath retention unless it's just a tiny little bit amount of time. And we'll talk about that pranayama techniques in a different lecture. But you don't want to hold your breath. Breathe, because that's how oxygen gets to the baby. Your blood needs fresh oxygen. Your organs need oxygenated blood. Holding your breath could cause you to pass out. We don't want any of those things to happen. We really want to be concerned with making sure that they are breathing, that they are that they're happy, they're healthy, that everything is going smoothly. No overstretching, and this is a hard one. This one's when you're pregnant, your body relaxes, or your body produces a chemical called relaxin, and it is to aid and facilitate in delivery of a baby. To stretch out those, to get the pelvis to spread apart. It's a lot of muscles, tendons, ligaments, everything is being stretched here. And relaxin helps the body to prepare to expel a child. It also helps all of the rest of your body to feel more flexible. Injuring yourself during pregnancy is going to take you a long time to recover from. If you hurt a hamstring or you hurt your hip flexor, because all of a sudden you're like, hey, look what I can do, lifting your leg up over your head. Don't overstretch, and be very cautious about that, explaining to people that just because you feel like you might be able to go into that a little deeper right now doesn't mean you should. Kind of a good rule of thumb for everything. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, especially with this relaxin. It's very, very easy to overstretch and hurt something, because this really doesn't just work on muscles, but it's helping with ligaments too, because the pelvis that has to widen to help facilitate childbirth. Try not to overstretch the abdominals. So, in one thing that I always comes to mind is upward facing dog and in cat cow. Just a very gentle stretch through that front of the body. Now, it's always so. A lot of times when people are pregnant, they have that where the muscles in your lower abdomen separate. It just was right on my head and flew out. It'll come back. It'll come back. But your transverse abdominis, it separates. Sometimes it can tear, and you don't want to further exacerbate that stretch. So be very gentle with those abdomen stretches. Your skin is already stretched really far. Your muscles are already being stretched. Just take it nice and gentle. Yeah, there's always exceptions. There's a lady I follow on Instagram. She's the owner of Blue Spot. Throughout 3 pregnancies, this woman has continued on with her practice like she was never pregnant. And that's what her body is used to. That's what her muscle memory is used to. That being pregnant to her was not anything that really changed much. But we want the people in our care to be safe. So don't overstretch the abdominals. Take it nice and slow. No jump backs. No jump backs. No jump backs. No jump forwards. No jarring of the body. Just step back. And you really don't see a lot of jump backs except in those higher level classes. So most of the time, people are going to take it cautiously anyway. Because what if you would... The idea of someone's foot slipping and landing on their belly is horrifying. So just remind them, no jump backs. No heated classes. No, don't go. You don't want to encourage anyone who is pregnant to go to one of those superheated classes, 90 degrees with high humidity. Try to keep your body at a moderate temperature. And they're going to be uncomfortable anyway. So the way I look at pregnancy is you're harboring a parasite. They're taking all of your energy, they're taking all of your water, all of your food, they're making you extra hot, they're making you have to pee all the time. There's a lot going on to your body. So we don't want to add that extra heat to it. So encourage them to take a class that is either not heated or maybe is in an air-conditioned room or just, room temperature, but no heated classes. I had a lady come when I was subbing in Dublin at... Lifetime there. Their yoga studios is not too much smaller than 7, and they cram 35, 40 people in there, which is fire code. Like I think 35 or 37 is maximum. And this lady comes waddling in. I was just subbing, and she puts her mat down, and she said, "This is my first yoga class. What made you choose to come to a 95-degree class, fast flow, like level 2-3? Because her doctor told her to try yoga. She would not listen to me. I told her not to come in, would not be a good idea. I said, I can only advise you not to take this class. It's not a great idea. She just wouldn't listen. She's like, I'll be fine. She puts her mat down next to a gentleman who says, if you were my wife, I would not let you take this class. It's like, well, even my husband doesn't tell me what to do. But he was able to convince her just by, I guess, appealing to some other side of her that I couldn't appeal to as the instructor. But she finally got up and left, and she didn't talk to me as she left, but she listened to him, and whatever he said, she listened to. And I was so glad, because you have to kind of wrestle with that. They're not going to listen. So do you leave? Yes, you have insurance, but gosh, that's just so, it's just, it like makes me shiver even thinking about it, like that what could have happened. So just encourage people not to take those fast, hot classes when they're pregnant. Now, of course, there are some people that are used to it. Maybe someone's been coming to your class the entire time. They're walking in and they've not really ever practiced before. Get them out. Tell them, no, thank you. I'm glad you're here. Let me offer you a free pass. Let me tell you about all these other classes we have. Maybe this one would be better suited for you. But don't feel intimidated, because you have their best interest in mind and the best interest of their baby. By the second trimester, no more arm balances. So no forearm stands, no head stands, and of course there's people they're going to do it anyway. But really encourage that. to not to be inverted like that. You know, your weight distribution is quite different. It's not something that you've experienced before, because, you know, if you gain weight otherwise, you usually gain it all over your body. But when you're pregnant, for the most part, you're gaining it right on the front of the body, and it can really, really mess up your equilibrium. And why do you want to take that chance of accidentally falling over, forward or backwards, and hurting yourself? So just no inversion, no arm balances. By the third trimester, balance poses should be suggested against a wall or a chair, because your center of gravity is just all off. I mean, think about how you walk, how it's hard to, your body is just undergoing so many changes. And even though 9 months it seems like a long time, it's actually kind of a really short amount of time if you think about it, because you don't really start popping out till your second trimester. So it just, 6 months of going from, your average size to something that's quite larger, and it's just centered almost in one part of your body. So, just be very careful with that. You recommend against the wall, we have chairs at our studio. Most places are going to have chairs. Don't flip yourself upside down. Legs up a wall is perfectly fine. Practice lots of hip openers. Malasana or garland pose, that little squat that we do with our, you put your elbows inside of your knees. That is a natural elimination posture. And, in America, we eliminate in a different way. We sit down on a toilet, and that's not the body's natural way of getting anything out of our body. So our body's natural way is in that squatted position. And if we could do lots of hip openers that way, start to open up those hip flexors for them and help them there. Of course, and not to encourage overstretching, but a lot of hip openers are usually very welcome. I get a lot of requests for back, the entire back, but a lot of lower back stuff. It's a little bit harder during pregnancy. We'll talk about some of the modifications, but those are just some basic things to look for when you're teaching anyone who's pregnant. And I can guarantee you that there will be people that come in that are pregnant, and they will walk into your typical class. I have one lady who has been a student of mine for years, 5 years, almost 6 years, I think, and she's pregnant now. She's in her third trimester, and we met early on. I was one of the first people that knew she was pregnant because she was still coming to class, and she let me know. So I've been giving her little hints along the way. But some people will just not listen to their body, which is frustrating generally. But when they have you are kind of responsible for two lives, right? You're responsible for the parent, and you're responsible for that baby. So, just help them to be cautious. And I will show you modifications, not in this video. Well, I guess I could. I'll do it. I'll just set this up. It'll just be a little bit of an awkward transition here. I have to use my garden gnome to hold up my iPad. Okay, let's see. Can you kind of see? Yeah, I think so. All right. So when I was talking about the modification for the chaturanga, the tricep push-up, generally we would be here in that plank and lowering down to the floor. Instead, that modified version where you have your knees on the floor, you are at an angle. All they have to do is bend their knees and come back up. They can be in their downward facing dog. This is not too much of an inversion. This is usually pretty comfortable. They can be fully piked, or they can be here. When they're in cat-cow, just gentle. A very gentle flexion of the spine. So, we would generally have that big back bend in cobra. Their back bend is going to be very, very small, more like a cat-cow. So maybe they are here, come down halfway, back up, come into cow, tuck their toes, and they can send their hips up and back. Just a very simple modification. And when I was talking about the malasana or the garland pose, I don't know about these shorts for this. You know, you want to be down here. This is an elimination posture. It's a great posture to help open up the hips. This is one of my pregnant friends' favorite postures. She'll ask to do this one a lot. So another way you can start to even open up the groin is just that simple bound angle pose, Baddha Konasana, pressing the knees down. Just a great way to open these up. Pigeon is a little more challenging, of course, but you could even still do the makeshift pigeon where you have one leg in front of the body, one leg beside the body. One of our YTT participants used to call this broken pigeon. I just like to call it baby pigeon. I've also heard it called, it was something weird, like donkey. I don't remember what it was. I'll have to look up the different variations of that. But this is also another great way to open up hips, of course, your pigeon. Now, again, pigeon is a tricky one, but don't encourage them to overstretch. Remember, just nice, gentle stretches. So that modification again, knees, bend, elbows, brush back towards the ribs, their gentle back bend, hips up and back, downward facing dog. And even in their forward folds, this can be a forward fold. Still getting a nice little stretch here in the hamstrings. You can always, if they really want to do that forward fold where they're standing, open up the legs, hanging down, but this is the same stretch, legs out, coming forward. That way they can still stretch out the hamstrings, but you're not in that inversion. Of course, legs up a wall, they're going to be propped up, but their legs are going to be up the wall. So I will show you when I do the modifications. I am going to go to the studio one day for that because I can use the straps and the blocks and all that stuff there. So I can show you better what I'm talking about, getting propped up in the studio against a wall for legs up a wall. So that is prenatal. It's just barely touching on it, but those are the highlights, and those are the ones you mostly need to be careful of. And when we meet again, if you have questions, I encourage you to please reach out with questions because, you know, you don't want anyone to get hurt. Of course, people don't always listen, but do your best, be knowledgeable so that you can spread the wisdom, and you'll be all right. And I will see you again soon.